Okay, so today's lesson is about creating a complementary color continuum. Last lesson, we created a prismatic color continuum, right? And now we're going to discover how these prismatic colors, when used together as complementary colors, and we're going to see the results of that interaction of colors. Right? So let's reconstruct a little bit our color wheel, right? So our three primary colors are red, yellow, right, and blue. Okay. And what we're trying to identify here is the complementary colors, right? So these are our primary colors, right? If we mix red and yellow together, we get our orange, which is a secondary color, right? And then our yellow and blue, right? We get our green, which is the secondary prismatic color, right? And then if we mix our red and blue, right, we get a violet, which is a secondary prismatic color, right? And so these are our chromatic colors on the periphery, right? And so, and we also have to keep in mind, right, that our hot and cool colors, right? These are our hot colors, and these are our cool colors, right? The red, orange, yellows are the hots. The violets, blues, and greens are the cool colors, right? And so now what we want to do is we want to identify the complementary colors, right? And the complementary colors are directly across from each other in the circular color wheel configuration, right? So the complementary color of orange is blue, right? The complementary color of red is green, okay? And the complementary color of violet is yellow, right? And so all the colors on the periphery here, these prismatic colors, right, they are chromatic, they are bright, right? And so what we're learning here is how to reduce the value of our prismatic colors in the most advantageous way in order to not to compromise the inherent energy of the color, right? And remember that the exterior of the wheel is prismatic, chromatic, meaning bright, and then as we move towards the middle, it becomes achromatic, right? Which means less bright, so to speak, right? So, and as you can see, all the colors in between, all these analogous colors on the edges, right? They also have complementary colors, right? So it's an infinite number of complementary color relationships, right? Depending on the nuance of your color, okay? So, all right, so we're going to recreate three complementary color continuums, right? In a linear fashion, right? So the first one is going to be red and green, right? Okay, and then we're going to have blue and orange, right? And another one, violet and yellow. Okay, so those are the three complementary color continuums that we're going to create, and we're going to discover all the beautiful colors that are created, you know, in between these primary and secondary colors, the prismatic colors, right? We're going to discover all the achromatic colors that are created moving towards the center of the color wheel, right? Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. All righty, so here we go. We're ready to paint our complementary color continuums. We got some watercolor paper here. We're going to use a full sheet okay? And we're gonna tape it down and get this thing going here. So, okay, so here's a full sheet. We need to create 3 areas, right? So we're gonna paint 3 complementary color continuums, right? So we need to create those 3 areas, right? Linear areas going across the page. Right? So here we go. We like to tape it down nice and neat, nice and square. Okay. Okay. And we like to tape it down to create nice edges, also to manage the paper as it gets wet. It starts to buckle and take on a life of its own, so this helps to manage the paper, trying to keep it as flat as possible. So we're creating 3 linear areas. One area for our red and green complementary continuum, for our blue and orange complementary color continuum, and our yellow and violet. So here we go. Okay. Nice. And I just did it by eye. Very good. And so what I like to do is I like to label this. So we're going to go red, green, blue, orange, and yellow and violet. Okay. And so we're going to paint these continuums right across here. We have our water, our color. Okay, so let's start with the red. And the important thing here is to establish a pretty solid layer of red there. But before we do that, I need to wet the surface, right? To make it conducive for the pigment and for the paint to lay down on the paper in as smooth a manner as possible. So I use my large brush, square brush, to distribute some water on the surface. Okay. It always helps to wet the surface, especially when you're trying to mix or blend colors, right? So the water is very important, and to distribute it nice and evenly. Okay. Very good, right? So let's get to establishing our red, okay? And red on this side all the way to the middle, right? And we want to get a pretty saturated, dense layer of red here, because it then it has to interact with the green to make it solid, right? And we're going to bring it all the way to the center into that area where the color is going to be achromatic. So we have to make sure that we get a nice solid red there. Okay. Very good, right? And so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to lay down the green. But let me just finish this. I see I'm not quite on center here. A little bit further, right about there. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to establish the green. Okay. So I'm going to push back my red, right? And so the green is a secondary color, so we need to mix that. Okay. And we're always making sure as not to contaminate the color, right? So let me make sure I have enough blue, because blue is very important to the green, in the sense that we need to make that green solid and nice and dark. And the blue is exactly what does that. Okay. So here we go, right? So, okay, so we're going to mix I want to make sure I got all my red off the brush. Okay. Okay, so the blue and the yellow create that green. And I want to make that green nice and solid. Okay. Nice and solid. Okay, perfect. Okay, so I'm going to lay it down here. Let's make it a little brighter. Okay, and in this particular case, you can see how this is going. I don't want to have drippings all over the page, but okay, so. Okay. And for that last stroke, I want to make sure I just lay it down and not play with it. Okay. Okay, right down the middle. Okay, now we're going to dry this, the juxtaposition of these two colors, right? And then we're going to meticulously overlap the green onto the red. A very thin layer starting, and then more green, more denser until we get to a dense, and vice versa. A little bit of red here, a little more red, more until we get to a dense achromatic area. I have my green is ready to go. I'm going to start by overlapping the green onto the red, and I want to pick up just a very light value of this green. So I'm increasing my density and value as I get to the middle. So I'm just putting just a tiny bit of green as my first layer right next to the prismatic part. And there you go. There's my first shot. It's a little dark, but c'est la vie, right? So now I'm going to pick up a little more. Okay, and a little more. And you can see the red is deepening, but it's still red. And I'm increasing my value each time by pushing a little bit more blue into that green, making it a little darker. Right. Okay. I'm making it darker and darker as I move towards the middle. Dark green right there. One last shot of dark green right there. Okay, and you can see these the transition of color, right? And when it dries back, we'll see it even better. Okay, so there are imperfections here, but that's fine. Okay, all right, so now let's overlap the red onto the green, right? Okay, so I need to clean up the palette a little bit here so that I can pick up some pure red and work with it. Okay. All right. Okay, so let's work with our red. Okay, so our red. And so our first value we're going to put down is very, very light. Okay. Very, very, very light value of red. Okay, so I'm going to just... somehow the red is not interacting with the green. Interesting. It's kind of bubbling up there. It's okay, we'll coax it a little bit. And I'm increasing the amount of red as I move towards the middle. Okay, increasing the density of the red. For some reason, these colors aren't interacting properly, but that's okay. You get the idea here. So you get these browns. Okay. Okay, well, let's take a look. So now you can see my green wasn't deep enough in this area to hold up to the red, but that's okay. But you can see the transition of values and all these different colors that start to appear. Okay, and so let's dry this back a little bit. And here's a little technique. If you develop a pool or something like that, you can wick it up. Okay, with a piece of paper towel. Okay, so our next continuum is going to be blue to orange, right? Blue being the primary color, orange being a secondary color, and they're both complements, right? And so we're going to lay out our blue and our orange and then integrate the two colors, right? And to reveal all the interesting colors that fall in between, right? So first thing I want to do is I want to make sure my palette is loaded. Okay, I'm going to start with my blue. Okay, the first thing I want to do though is to wet the surface that we're going to be mixing colors on. All right, there's still some residual color on my brush which I want to remove. Okay. Right, so I'm wetting the surface. All right, you want to distribute the water as evenly as possible. All right. And what that does is it makes the paper it kind of treats the paper. In other words, the water creates a surface that makes it more conducive for the the pigment in the water to bind with the paper, right? So, okay, so here we go. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mix up some blue, right? Enough blue to cover our left side, okay? I need more pigment than that. I gotta mix up a whole bunch of it. Okay. My continuum up here got a little too dense, so I'm going to step it back and see how we do with a slightly less dense continuum here. All right. Make it a little bit more free-flowing. Okay. And remember, what this does, it gets you familiar with how to mix the paint, how much water to use. So this is all part of getting acquainted with watercolor, right? So I'm going to leave it at that. And the more you play with it, the worse it gets, okay? So I'm going to leave that like that. And now I'm going to mix our orange, right, which is the complement of blue. Okay. First, I'm going to clean up my palette again. Okay. Okay. Make room for mixing the orange. Want to get it nice and clean. Okay, here we go. Let's mix up some of that orange. So we got to get the red going with the yellow. And you see how yellow is very, very vulnerable to colors. It's a light color, and you want to make sure you don't overwhelm it with the red. Okay, so here's a nice orange. All right, so here we go. First we lay it down on the extremity, establish the color. Right, that's our pure color on the outside. Okay. Okay. Right, and that one last shot right there as it begins to mix with the blue. Okay, so now I'm going to dry. Okay, now I got it dry, and while I have the orange here readily available, let's apply it and layer it over the blue, mix it with the blue, and see what happens. So first I start really light, okay, and I put a little layer over that. Okay. Make it darker and darker, more and more saturated. Right? It's creating all these browns and interesting colors, right? That's what we want. And the deeper the orange gets, delicately going over it. Right? Some red coming through there. Okay, so you can see how it's become sort of a darker value of blue, and then it turns brown and starts changing in its hue. Okay. Some underlying large amounts of blue there. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to clean up my palette, and I'm going to... Okay, so let's see what happens now. Here I have my palettes clean. I got my blue ready to go. And so I need to mix up a bunch of blue. And my first application of blue is very light. All right, so I'm going to just put it right there. Okay, now I'm going to get a little darker. Right, get a little darker as we move towards the middle. Right, and each time my value is getting darker and darker as I move towards the middle, and you can see all these colors starting to appear, mixing together. Right, the greens and the browns and then as we get closer to the middle, right, it gets more and more achromatic. Right? Okay, so look at all these beautiful colors coming out, right? And so we're going to, again, dry that. Okay, so let's look. So we did the brown and we did the blue and the orange, right? Created all these beautiful colors, the nuances, right? And we have our green and red, right? And the next one is yellow and violet. Okay, so let's go ahead. Let's start with our yellow. Okay, since it's our primary color. All right, let's make sure we have enough yellow. Okay, and we want to wet the area first, again, to make the paper a little more receptive to the pigment and the color, the pigment, right? So we're just wetting the surface. And it's much easier to create a smoother sort of effect when the paper is wet. Okay. All right, there you go. Okay. All right, let's get some yellow going here. Get a pool of yellow going. And we're going to put the yellow on the left side. Okay. And we want to make sure there's enough yellow down there, enough strength to the yellow to sustain the layer of blue over the top of it, okay? And we'll bring the yellow right to the center. Okay, pretty good, right? All right, so Next thing I want to do is I want to clean up my yellow. Right? And all this is part of the technique. You know, you want to keep your palette segregated like this, you know, and constantly managing. When you need to use pure color, you got to clean the palette and use the pure color, because that's the purpose of the exercise, okay? So, our next color to mix is the violet, so I have to make sure I have enough blue. Right, blue and red make violet, right? So we want to make sure we have enough of that on the palette, and here we go. So, okay, so blue and red. And I'm going to keep it on the red side like that. There's our violet. Okay. Make sure we have enough of that. Blue and red. This is violet, right? Okay, so here's the first layer of violet. It's not very strong. I think I need to deepen it. Oops. Okay. Oop. You can see how the paper dried out a little bit. Okay. Getting close to the yellow, so I gotta make sure I got my enough violet and give it one shot right there. All right, where the colors meet. Okay, and that's so it. I'm not gonna play violet going right on my palette. I'm going to mix up a little bit more. Okay, and I'm going to start out with a very, very light value, right? First shot right next to where it's bright. Okay, and I'm going to get deeper and deeper, darker. And you can see it as I'm laying down this color, right? It's really interesting the way the complementary color just reduces the value. And it's still, it creates like this brown, but essentially that is yellow. You know, brown is just a deeper yellow. Okay. As I increase the saturation, the density of the pigment, the color that I pick up, the color will get darker. Less chromatic towards the middle. Denser. I'm creating the denser violet. Okay. There we we go. Right? Okay. And it's less chromatic in the middle. Okay. Now I'm going to clean up my palette and implement the yellow. The last leg here, we're going to layer the yellow on top of the violet and mix it in. First layer of yellow is going to be very, very delicate, right? Okay. And as we get closer to the middle, we can increase our value of yellow. Creates these, because of the red and the violet, it creates this bright brown. It's really cool. Right. Okay. There we are. Okay, let's dry this and see what happens. Let's review what we've done here, right? So we used 3 colors, right? Red, blue, and yellow to create all these colors, right? So with the red, in order to create, look at that deeper value of red. We put green in there to create that. We didn't put black in there, right? And look at that. All these values got deeper and deeper, right? Okay. And so here, the green didn't withstand the red very much here, but anyway, we were able to see some of these darker greens by putting red on it, okay? And then the green became less and less chromatic, right? Until it turned into this brown, right? So that red and the green creates a brown of a certain hue, a reddish green brown, right? And now let's look at our blue and orange relationship, right? So we took yellow and red to create the orange, right? And we put a little bit of orange in there, and that blue started turning greenish, right? And then it got darker and darker, right? And as we put little bits of blue and more blue into the orange, you see it became browner and greener. And interesting how you can see the nuances of the 2 colors that make up that orange. You can see it revealed as the yellow comes out, right? Okay, as it mixes with the blue, that yellow starts to read like a green, but not as green as that. It's more of like a bluish green, right? So, again, all these colors are derived from these 3 primary colors, red, blue, and yellow. Pretty amazing, right? And look at, this is my favorite, the yellow and violet range. I love these browns and all these beautiful colors, right? And each one of these complementary color continuums has a certain, how would you say, gearing of color. They naturally are fitting together, right? That's not by accident. This is the way color works, right? Okay, so with the violet, look at the way, in order to make a darker yellow, you put a little violet in there and it right away grays out, right? But the violet is, you don't see the violet, but the yellow stays yellow, right? And here you start to see more and more violet until you get in the middle here, and it turns brownish violet, okay? And then here the violet wasn't strong enough underneath to withstand that. But anyway, regardless, you still see all these beautiful shades of violet and yellow and so forth, right? So here you go. There's that complementary continuum, right? Complementary color continuum, right? There's different ways of approaching this. I mean, you could have mixed every combination and put it down separately, right? And the approach we used where we were overlapping the color, right? It's a little bit more expedient. There's a lot more sort of nuances that come about. But regardless, what this exercise does, it reveals the color and how it works, right? And so now we're going to implement this color going forward into various exercises, okay? And so you need to review this and practice these continuums several times, okay? Very good. These are complementary color continuums. Red, green, blue, orange, yellow, violet. Very good.